welcome you and thank you for joining our first Vital Conversations evening and allowing the Maple Ridge Community Foundation virtually to come into your homes and be part of this. I want to begin the evening. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional unceded territory of the Katzie and Kwantlen First Nations. Today, this is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work, live, and play on this land. And it's important to acknowledge that this morning. At this point, or this evening, at this point, I've talked about the polls, and I'm just gonna share screen. Bear with me here, folks. There we go. So the Maple Ridge Community Foundation, I just want to give a brief introduction and tell you a little bit about our organization, a wee bit of history. The Maple Ridge Community Foundation was incorporated in 1976. We're a nonprofit society registered under the Societies Act of BC. We're guided and directed by a local board of directors, independent, non-political, nonpartisan. The endowment funds that we manage are made possible by the generosity of Maple Ridge residents over the past 40 plus years. Residents that have left a legacy to our community that is giving back, and in some cases, 2 and 3 generations. This amazing group of people that I get to work with is our volunteer board of directors. Residents and business people that believe in a healthy and vibrant community in which all people have the opportunity to enhance the quality of their lives and the lives of others. And the common thread that is woven through these 12 folks is a shared passion and a shared love for Maple Ridge. So again, who are we? The foundation holds private resources called endowment funds, and they're entrusted for the common good of the community. In order to support the needs in our community, we need solid, ongoing contributions from residents and businesses in the community. This allows us to grow our endowment funds, building a legacy for our donors and residents. Together, we can do great things. We're neighbors helping neighbors. We are building an even better community together. The foundation manages a portfolio of endowment funds with the help of professional investors with the goal to earn interest in perpetuity. A gift to the Maple Ridge Community Foundation in any amount supports your community today and in the future. The interest earned each year is given back to the community in financial grants through our fall granting program to registered nonprofits and charitable organizations. By retaining and protecting the principal in our endowment funds, the granting income from them each year means we can continue to provide support for our local community nonprofits year after year, and in fact for decades. In 2020, the Maple Ridge Community Foundation received requests for over $90,000 from local nonprofit organizations. This image, this tree, illustrates the areas of the community we have supported, totaling over $860,000 since 2000. That's right, $860,000. The need for school meal programs funding specifically has been more than we've ever seen before. Growing our endowment funds is the only way we can ensure the sustainability and the funding that we need in the future. I want to use a watering can analogy, if you can bear with me for a minute. So as the funds come into our endowment, it's like watering the tree to ensure its continued growth and its continued health. It's easy to get involved. You can contribute to your own endowment fund for a cause that's near and dear to your heart, or you can contribute to our general endowment fund along with many others. This ensures that that watering can stays full. Who receives our grants? I knew you were going to ask me that, so I've got some answers, and I'd like to tell you. We help to feed kids. We protect our youth. We support seniors. We help care for the environment. We support other charities to make a difference. And what a remarkable ripple effect takes place. There's positive impacts made on so many people in our community. Working with the community foundations means neighbors are supporting and helping neighbors. Registered charities and nonprofits in Maple Ridge may apply for these grants. The funds are distributed to organizations every fall. In fact, our 2021 grants event is coming up in December, and applications are now being accepted. Scholarships for local students are also made available through School District 42. Who received our grants? In 2020, we were unable to host our grants night in person, but we are a nimble organization and we are creative. And we hosted our event virtually, and then we were able to deliver funds to each one of our award recipients at their location. Even though we weren't able to celebrate together as a group, we still had fun supporting our neighbors in creative ways. This is a list of just some of the organizations that we've been able to help. Well, specifically in 2020, $58,000 was granted out. We were able to, you'll see a diversity of requests that we received, and the areas of community where extra support is needed. And again, as I mentioned, school meal programs is a big one. The reality is the needs of our community are great, and we're fortunate to be able to meet some of the needs of the community, but only about half of the requests we got. We were also able to support other organizations that have a multitude of programs serving different groups in Maple Ridge. Our school programs supported children and families through breakfast and lunch programs, take-home backpack programs, and family hampers over the holidays. And it's important to invest in our future. And who's our future? It's our youth. And that's going to pay dividends for years down the road. In 2020, we were able to provide $12,000 in scholarships to School District 42 students. Another part of the Maple Ridge Community Foundation is the Community Chest. The Maple Ridge Community Chest is an effort to prevent small family crises from nudging Maple Ridge families past the point of no return into that cycle of poverty that plagues so many families in our community today. It's a partnership of the Maple Ridge Community Foundation and the Maple Ridge Meadows Katzie Community Network. Donors may specifically direct their funds to the Community Chest. I just want to share a couple of stories with you on the positive impact that this endeavor makes. First story, we had a mom, her young lad broke the patio door. Landlord wants it fixed. She's got safety concerns. Community Chest was able to help out and get the door fixed. There's another mom. She was given a bus passes and a gas card so that she could travel to her practicum placement and complete her academic program. There's a single dad attending a parenting course. He couldn't read the material or focus on the program. He literally could not read the material. And it was, we think maybe simple. He needed a new prescription for his glasses. So the Community Chest was approached. He now has a proper set of glasses with the right prescription, and he's participating in the program, and it's going really well. Another mom struggling to make ends meet. Her growing son needed a bigger bed. The air mattress just wasn't cutting it anymore. So Community Chest helped out, and now her 9-year-old son has a proper bed for a growing boy. And I know you were going to ask me how you can help out. So here's just a few things that I'd like to share. You can make an outright cash gift in any amount. Securities, property. You can speak to your employees or employer about creating a corporate giving campaign to help you set up a payroll contribution with your employer. A few years ago, that's what Judy and I did. We wanted to contribute to a family fund. We set it up and we could forget about it. It just happened. One example is if $20 per paycheck means you contribute $500 to the foundation in a year. Over 10 years, that means you've contributed $5,000. You have 100 people in our community do that. That would grow to $500,000, and that's for $20 a paycheck. So we recognize that people are in different situations, so we can be creative. The other option is to leave a bequest in your will. So I need this to stay between us tonight. Please don't tell my kids, because this is another thing that we've done. A percentage of our estate will go to a couple of causes that have been near and dear to us in our life, and we want to leave a legacy to them in our passing. Hopefully, that's decades down the road, but the Maple Ridge Community Foundation is part of our planned giving for down the road. And we recognize and respect that there are lots of options out there. Not everybody's situation is the same. There are several ways to leave a gift to the Maple Ridge Community Foundation, and we would ask you to consider, chatting with your financial planner to see what works best for you. And then in our Maple Ridge Community Foundation year, we've got fundraising events, the Citizen of the Year dinner in the spring, golf tournament in the early summer, pub nights, and other initiatives throughout the year. During the pandemic, again, we had to be creative and nimble. We hosted a virtual gala. We did some online trivia nights. We did a community car wash, and we just had a huge online raffle with over $42,000 in prizes. And by the way, any of these events, we're always looking for volunteers. Maple Ridge is home to most of us, and the folks that live here, they're the ones that bring the passion, the laughter, the stories, the excitement, and yes, at times the tears and the challenges to the story of our community. It's what makes our community a tapestry. Supporting the Maple Ridge Community Foundation is a way to give a hand up to your neighbor, and again, that ripple effect that goes out a long way. In July, board member Kevin Noseworthy was compelled to create a memorial fund to honor the lives of the 215 children discovered on the grounds of the Kamloops Residential School. The income earned from this special fund will be directed to specific causes in the name of the children lost. Those interested in contributing to this special fund can contact us at the foundation or visit our Canada Helps donation portal, naming the fund. And just to wrap up, a couple more. If you'd like to learn more about the incredible organizations that we've recently supported, check out our YouTube channel. There you'll find the videos about the projects we've supported, from food insecurity to mental health to education to seniors care. The list goes on and on. And again, we are neighbors helping neighbors. A one-time or an ongoing monthly gift to the Community Foundation ensures that we can continue to support these many needs in Maple Ridge. Please share what you've learned or heard from us tonight. There's lots of good things to celebrate. Look for us on social media, Facebook, Instagram. Like and share our features. Talk to your coworkers or family and friends. Help us to spread the word about our foundation. We can build a better community together. In fact, we are building a better community together. We are Maple Ridge. And I just want to express my appreciation for taking the time to learn a little bit more about our community foundation and the work that we do in our community. And excuse me. So right now, I'd like to introduce Leanne Scott. And Leanne is joining us tonight from Leith Wheeler Investment Council, who has been the Community Foundations of Canada Vital Signs National Partner since January of 2019. She has been in the investment management industry for over 20 years and helps private clients and foundations manage their money. Outside of work, she likes to spend time with her family and help out in her community. She's also on the board of directors as vice chair of a not-for-profit society. So at this time, I'd like to turn the floor over to Leanne. Thank you for doing this for us tonight. Thank you for making it possible.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Ernie, and thank you so much for that nice introduction. And I really, that is a lot of really amazing good work that you and the rest of the Maple Ridge Community Foundation provides. So thank you very much for all you do. And hello to everyone. It's a real pleasure to be with you all today. As Ernie mentioned, I work with Leith Wheeler Investment Council, and as a firm, we've been managing foundation accounts for over 40 years now, and we currently have more than 108 clients in the not-for-profit sector. So because we've always worked with communities and foundations, we decided a few years ago to look at ways that we might be able to partner together. And as we began to explore options with a variety of community foundation members, we learned that we shared a lot of the same values. And in particular, vital signs was very appealing to us as a firm. As investment managers, we obviously work with numbers and data on a daily, and we recognize the importance of data-driven decision-making. We also acknowledge the output and power of vital signs, and we are very proud of this partnership with the Community Foundation movement. And last week, I was very fortunate. I had a really great chat with Brenda Norrie about Maple Ridge and some of the challenges you're facing, growing very, very quickly, I understand, which is wonderful. But again, it comes with its own set of challenges for sure. So I commend her and everyone at the foundation for getting this series up and running and having these important conversations. As a firm, it's really very important to us to be able to give back to the communities where we work and live. So we're incredibly honored to support Vital Conversations across Canada. I thank you so much for inviting me this evening, and I look forward to learning with you all.
Awesome, thanks, Leanne. And it is important to, I'm not a numbers guy particularly, but it's a good thing because at the end of the day, those numbers need to be managed because it has a direct impact on people. And that's key. So thank you for making this evening possible. So now I'd like to introduce Len Pierre, who everybody has come to listen to this evening. Len is owner and founder of Len Pierre Consulting and is Coast Salish from the Katzie First Nation. He specializes in the development of educational programs and services, as well as Indigenous knowledge systems and community engagement. With a background in adult education and Indigenous methodology, Len aims to decolonize and transform corporate systems, approaches, policies, and curriculum content in any professional discipline. In a time of truth and reconciliation, Len believes that the need to bridge Indigenous and non-Indigenous realities has never been greater. With a focus on recentering Indigenous knowledge and values, he provides educational lectures, workshops, consultation services to any willing service provider. We are grateful that Len is taking the time to be with us this evening and to share from his wisdom and about his community. And I look forward, Len, to what you have to share about the Katzie history, culture, and people. Thank you and a warm welcome, Len. And the floor is yours, sir.
Hi, Chika. Thank you so much, Ernie. And thank you, everybody, for being here. I was on the other side. I was on the audience side, and then I just been bounced into the panelist side. So I was like, I wonder how many people are here. So I see that there's 114 of us here this evening. So thank you all so much for excuse me, clicking the registration button and taking a bit of time out of your evening today to lean into a conversation. And by conversation, I really do emphasize, conversation. I seen in the chat box, people who are really excited about joining tonight's conversation. And so I'd like to emphasize that. And really, I come to you this evening with an open heart and an open mind to share anything that kind of comes to my mind. When we talk about Katzie First Nation, there are a lot of things to kind of talk about. We can talk about Katzie history, Katzie culture, Katzie language, Katzie community, and our values and wants and desires today and our hopes for the future. We can talk about, there's so many different things that we can kind of talk about. So I would like to put each and every one of you into the driver's seat for tonight's conversation, and invite you to lean into the conversation by asking really great questions. There's nothing off the table for discussion, and there's no such thing as a silly question. So I really want to emphasize that our little bit of time that we get here this evening is meaningful. And I want to make it meaningful for each and every one of you. So feel free to chime in at any point with your questions. I did not prepare anything. I really just kind of wanted to come and introduce myself and what it's been like to be a Katzie First Nation person in the 21st century, coming up and living in my community and still being an active leader in my community, and of course being a champion for change in a lot of the systems that scaffold this colonial country. So I thought I would just introduce myself in my good way and what kind of comes to mind for me about what I think you all need to know about Katzie First Nation. However, I don't want to spend too much time talking. I really want to spend as much time as I possibly can by answering your questions, because I don't assume that you have no knowledge or no prior experience working with or knowing or learning about Katzie First Nation and what it means to be Katzie. So with that in mind, Ace Whale, good day everyone. Miitzep Kwakwilam, good day and welcome. My name is Len Pierre. My ancestral name is Palikulak, and I am co-Salish from Katzie First Nation on my father's side, and on my mother's side, my bloodline comes from Musqueam First Nation, all within co-Salish territory. And I am a consultant by trade. If I peeled back that layer of being a consultant, I'm actually a teacher, an educator, as well as a social activist for systemic change for targeted and marginalized populations, including, our Indigenous community. And then, of course, at home, I am a father, loving partner, involved in my community in any way that I possibly can, a cultural practitioner, a traditional knowledge keeper in my community. And what does it mean to be a traditional knowledge keeper? It means that I have been blessed with, as well as had this profound privilege to have access to my culture and access to my knowledge keepers in my lifetime growing up. And I say that's a cultural privilege because not all of, I will say, my Indigenous relatives, my Indigenous brothers and sisters across Turtle Island, North America, have access to culture and what it means to be active within their cultural practices. So in that regard, I say that I am incredibly privileged and blessed to be able to say that I carry knowledge that is traditional in our community. So how, I would just explain a little bit about what it's been like growing up in Katzie. Katzie First Nation has 3 residential reserves that make up the nation today. Traditionally speaking, our traditional territory expanded all across the cities of Surrey, Langley, Maple Ridge, Pitt Meadows, and then of course beyond some. So today we have reservations in the city of Pitt Meadows, the city of Langley, and the city of Surrey, located on Barnston Island. If you ever have your GPS open and you drive beside a Katzie reservation, it says Katzie Indian Reserve number 1, number 2, number 3. And I grew up on Katzie IR3, which stands for Katzie Indian Reservation 3, which is located on a tiny little island called Barnston Island in the middle of the Fraser River, which growing up there is kind of like growing up on Never Never Land. It's completely cut off from the rest of the world, so to speak, especially as Surrey continues to urbanize and Langley continues to grow and Pitt Meadows and all these cities around us continue to grow around us. It's been such a joy to be able to grow up in an era of urbanization, and where, if you've ever been to Barnston Island, it's a beautiful rural and remote type of place. And growing up there, I grew up there my entire life. And in our Katzie IR3 population, there might have been about 30 to 40 of us while I was coming up. So a very small population of the Katzie First Nation population. And I grew up with one of the greatest things about growing up on Barnstone Island was growing up with my cousins. I had about a family of 12 to 15 cousins that I grew up with. And we all busted to school together. And so my cousins really were kind of like my brothers and sisters growing up. I have 2 younger brothers. And really, ultimately, I have like 15 to 20 because I grew up with them and we grew up like brothers and sisters. And I'll also say that growing up on Barnstone Island was such a privilege in a way that I was cut off from the rest of urban development around us, but still close enough to the city that we weren't necessarily ostracized. We had access to, a lot of things. And if you've ever been to Barnstone Island, there's only houses and farms on Barnstone. So there's not a lot going on there, but it's a ton of fun when you were growing up. There's a lot of room for climbing trees and getting lost in the forest. And you can't really get lost in the forest because you just have to keep walking straight. And then it's a very small island. So you're going to end up running out of the forest and to some degree out of the bush. So, but it was our playground. Our whole island was our playground. The island is about 10 kilometers all the way around. And it was the safest place for me to grow up with access to my culture, listening and learning from my elders, spending time on my territory, not just on Barnstone Island, but on the Fraser River. If you have a relationship or know anybody from Katzie First Nation, you probably know that we are incredible fishermen and fisherwomen. Full transparency, I'm not a fisherman. The Creator has blessed me in other ways. But Katzie First Nation are really well known for their strength in fishing. And all of our Coast Salish communities along the Fraser River, from Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish, all the way up the Fraser River to Stolo territory, all really incredibly involved in the river. The river is quite significant to us, the Fraser River. And Katzie First Nation has a reputation for being like a wall because salmon never get past our fishermen because they're incredibly skilled at fishing. And probably because we've been fishing in our water since the beginning of time. Our archaeological evidence to date puts us well past, the 10,000 year marker. Somewhere between 12 and 14,000 years old is the latest archaeological evidence that I have access to. I don't necessarily haven't been keeping up with our latest archaeological findings, but that's how old we are. And 12 to 14,000 years old means we're kind of ancient, right? We've been here for a long time. And part of being here for a long time is to have stories. We have stories about our land. Everywhere you go in the city of Maple Ridge, there's a story. Every landmark, every hill, every stream, every riverbank has a story tied to it that is a lot older than you or I. And that is our relationship to land as Katzie people. And I think that one of the most important things that we can think about as a community, because I come to this conversation in the spirit of community as a fellow community member of yours. And I think that one of the greatest things that we can walk away with from our conversation this evening is relationship to land and understanding Katzie First Nation's relationship to land. Because, to us, the land is not something that can be bought or sold or owned or exploited. I mean, today in a very economic type of way, yes, absolutely, because that is necessary to survive and that is necessary to provide to our community. But in a very traditional sense, it's unfathomable to think that the land could be owned, possessed, or exploited or capitalized on. And the reason for that is because the land is our mother and the land is our ancestor. I learned from an elder, a revered elder in our Coast Salish culture. His name is the Honorable Stephen Point. taught me a couple of weeks ago that, when we as Coast Salish people lost our loved ones, when somebody passed away in our community in a traditional sense, we wouldn't bury them in the ground. And that's quite common of many ancient cultures. But we never buried our deceased in the ground. We actually put them in cedar trees and wrapped them up and hung them up in cedar trees. And as their body decomposed, their remains would go into the soil, into the dirt, into the ground. And the fact that we've been here for 12 to 14,000 years, it means that every square inch of our traditional territory is our ancestors. You're walking on our ancestors. We are walking on our ancestors. And so if we could internalize just a portion of that we are walking in our ancestors and the land is our ancestors, that changes how we look at our own relationship to land. That every step I take in my traditional territory, I'm walking with my ancestors. So we take the issue of land and the caretaking of land very, very seriously. And one of our teachings that we have, or something that I've learned in my own Katzie culture, I always go to my elders and my language keepers, because our language is not on the verge of extinction. It was on the verge of extinction, and now it's in this place of resurgence, and reclamation by incredibly brave and patient and willing people who are gifted to listen to the language from non-Indigenous peoples who have archived it for us. And they listen and they learn, and they're teaching it back to us. But it used to be on the verge of extinction, but it's slowly coming back. And so I'm always bugging my elders for knowledge, and I'm always bugging my language keepers for knowledge. And so I remember I was a teenager when I was doing a presentation, and I was asking my elders what the word in Katzie was for human being, because I wanted to translate that word. What does it mean to be a human being in our traditional language? And our elders said, it's Chomach. You can go ahead and try and say it if you want. Chomach translates into the word human being. And I was like, oh, okay, thank you. I'm gonna go teach that. And then I started walking away, and they're like, whoa, get back here. And then so I went back and I was like, yeah. And they're like, well, that's the literal translation of what it means to be a human being. What it actually means in essence of the interpretation of the word is human being of the land. And if we can just internalize a portion of what that even means, that our direct word for human being is not human being in itself, but human being of the land, means that our identity is wrapped into the land, that we are nothing without the land. So that profoundly shifted how I looked at our relationship as Katzie people to the land, that not just the land is our mother, the land is also our ancestors. So there's the word for human being, which is Chwalmach. Our belly button is called Chwala. That's our Chwala. So you hear that Chwalmach, Chwala, and the word for physical land is what is it? It's escaping me now. Tamach. So Tamach, Chwala, Chwalmach. It means that as a human being, we have a spiritual umbilical cord tied right into the land. And the reason I say that, because if you ever see us in the news or the media doing protests or doing marches, defending and protecting our land, it's because it's like, would you protect, protest, or defend or march for your mother, right? Or your grandparents? Because that's the way we look at it. When we see exploitation of our lands and our resources, it's because we're defending our ancestors. We're defending, something that is very ancient, that is not separated from us. It's embedded into our DNA. And so imagine what lengths that you would go to, right? To defend your mother, to protect your ancestors, to protect your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, whoever it is that you love and care for, because they are a part of us. And that's one of the most beautiful things that I think that we can teach our children in our communities today. So if you have little ones at home, not even little ones, if you have children who are, 20 years old, 30 years old, or even in high school, teaching them that, our relationship to land is not distant from us, right? If we can conceptualize that we can have a relationship to land as a living thing, which it is. The world is alive. The earth is alive. You know, if we taught our children that, by the time our children become the next Pierre Trudeau, the next John Horgan, the next Jim Pattison, you know, how different would our world look regarding the climate crisis? How different would our world look for justice and fairness and equity and business and inclusivity? You know, there's a lot to gain from an Indigenous worldview and Indigenous values. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from one another as we continue to strengthen our relationship in our communities. Maple Ridge, Katzie, Pitt Meadows, Katzie, Coast Salish peoples, and the Lower Mainland municipalities, right? So that's kind of how I you know, like to, you know, offer that when we come together for the purpose of generating a conversation, what we can learn from one another. And one of the biggest things is land. And it's so important to me because I don't know if any of you have climate anxiety. Do you have climate anxiety? To me, it's no small thing that, you know, we had this record-breaking heat dome over the summer. And I'm kind of all over CBC radio now, and they're all talking about the next heat dome and how it's going to be even worse. I'm like, oh my gosh, and we lost people in the heat dome. People lost their lives to it. And I also think it's no small thing that in the summertime, there were fires. Our land was burning. Our land was on fire or covered in smoke. If the land wasn't on fire in your neighborhood, you know, it was covered with smoke. And so I also think that if we made more room for Indigenous peoples at governing tables and planning tables at an international level, I think that could also really drastically how we respond to and address the climate crisis moving forward. A couple of fun facts about Katzie First Nation. You know, we are old, we are ancient. Some of our favorite things to talk about within our culture itself are our language. The things that we value the most are one another. We as Katzie people love one another, and we have a strong sense of social cohesion about us. Katzie First Nation really is, at the end of the day, a very large family, well over 500 members in our family. And I say that not to romanticize, you know, our relationships, because we fight, we bicker, we engage in politics and don't get along all the time. We give people the silent treatment, some more than others, just like any community. But there is a tremendous sense of social cohesion. And if we ever lose a loved one in our community, you know, our cultural practice is that we put everything aside and we, you know, come together and we heal one another. And so that's a tremendous part of a value of Katzie, is just being together. So it's been a rough year for Katzie in not being able to come together because of COVID and physical distancing and social isolation. One of our greatest strengths has always been to come together. In our culture, we call that Nutsamat. Nutsamat means one mind, one heart, one spirit, because there's power in unity. There's power in coming together for the purposes of good work. And that's just one of our values. The salmon is also an incredible value. Salmon was our primary food source, and it is one of our symbols that is absorbed in Katzie identity, is the salmon. And we would eat the salmon all year round. And one of the saddest things, I think, because of, you know, global warming and the climate crisis and the exploitation of the salmon that swim in our rivers, is, you know, now there are almost no opportunities to fish today, when fishing has been a practice that is embedded into our DNA. It's in our blood memory to grow up on the river and fish and harvest and feast one another, because every Katzie person will, you know, feast on fish. It's very rare when a Katzie person doesn't eat salmon, but there are a few of them out there. And our fishermen, the most gifted fishermen, you know, give away, you know, hundreds of their own catch every single year to their elders, to their aunties, to their mothers, to the people who don't have the ability, the physical ability to go out and catch their own, because of that sense of social cohesion. And so that's one of the saddest things that I think that I've grown up with in my generation, is to see my parents engage in very rich harvests for the salmon run. And then to see that dwindle away to almost nothing, you know, is quite profound, and something that my generation, you know, is really kind of taken to heart. There's this grief almost with something that is so important as a part of our cultural identity is now kind of slowly, we're losing grasp and grip of it. And I think about, you know, my own child, if she will have that opportunity in her generation, if my generation is being impacted like this. My daughter is 14, and the cedar is also an incredible, valuable resource. Cedar is known in our culture as the tree of life. And I say that because it, traditionally speaking, we used like everything that we ever crafted was probably coming from the cedar tree. Our houses, our canoes, our paddles, our weapons, our tools, our clothing, and our medicine all came from the cedar tree. And if you ever see Katzie people and you ever have an opportunity to see a Katzie person open an event, or you ever visit Katzie First Nation, you might see cedar all over the place. Our elders will be carrying it. Our leaders will be carrying it. Sometimes in ceremonies, we stand people on cedar boughs. We hang cedar boughs above the doorway. So cedar in our culture is really seen as a spiritual medicine, because what we've learned is that cedar has a energy force around it, an energy force like an aura. You know what an aura is? It kind of goes beyond its physical realm, and it's kind of this invisibleness around it. Because we're taught that in this part of the world, especially around now, you know, the leaves are turning red and orange and yellow and all these beautiful colors. But in like 2-3 weeks time, you know, the trees will be incredibly bare, and the flowers will have died, and the grass will go brown. And, you know, the teaching is that spirituality leaves this part of the world. The vitality starts to drain out for that fall season, except for the cedar tree. The cedar tree stays green and strong all year long because it has that spiritual charge and medicine energy around it. So we use cedar to cleanse each other and one another off. So if we need to take care of somebody's spirit because of grief or just a burden on their mental processes, sometimes our spiritual workers or elders will brush people off with cedar and say a prayer for them. And the same can be said for drumming and singing. You know, drumming and singing is an incredible aspect of our culture. I don't know if you've ever had an opportunity to hear Katzie drummers, Kwantlen drummers. You know, it's one of my favorite things to do. Is I'm not a drummer or singer myself, but again, the Creator has blessed me in different ways. But I do think it's a gift to be able to hunt and to fish, and it's a gift to be able to be gifted the gift of voice and song and drumming and singing, and heal people through drumming and singing. And so when people drum and sing, it's seen as a unification of every human being who is hearing it. Our teachings of the drum are the symbol of the beating of the drum sounds like a beating of the heart, which is the first sound every human being hears before that they are born. You know, we're all born coming with the same experience, and that same experience is hearing our mother's heartbeat. And so the drum, when we're banging our drums, it's that unification, reminding us where we all come from. We all come from the same place, and that's our mother's womb. And that reminds us that we're all human beings, and to recognize each other as fellow human beings changes our egos, changes our politics, and changes our identity. And I cut my teeth in my career working in the education system with vulnerable children and youth. And I was in a session with children who had autism. And the most beautiful, magical, transformational thing that I'll never forget in my career is there was a group of 5 autistic children who had a hard time with self-regulation. And one of my young relatives, who's a cousin of mine, came in, and I wanted him to do a drumming and singing workshop for them just to bring culture into the classroom. And as he drum and sang, and 2 of them, actually, a male and a female cousins of mine, came in and they sang together. They did a duet, and it was the most beautiful song, one of my favorite songs. And as they did that, the children who have never heard this type of drumming or singing before, all of a sudden self-regulated and listened and learned and smiled. and their education assistants were like, they cannot sit still for anything, not for any teacher lesson, not for any music lesson, not for PE, not for library or anything. But that drumming and singing had this way of just bringing them back to their spiritual selves. And it was like some magical moment of what culture and what Indigenous specific culture in terms of drumming and singing, how it can speak to us. Yeah, so I just wanted to share that story. And I see that we got, roughly 11 minutes left. So I just wanted to stop and open up the floor. I've been seeing the chat boxes on fire, which I love and appreciate. So keep those coming. Yeah, let's have a conversation.
So,
okay. Oh, sorry.
I just jotted a couple of things down, Len. I'm trying to keep it. So a couple of the questions, and I've experienced this with some of my interactions with both Katzie and Kwantlen, the incredible respect you have for elders.
Yeah.
Your elders, and I think it seemed to me that the direction given to the chief and council was ground from the grassroots up to council, whereas I think sometimes ours is from the top down. So maybe just speak a little bit about that incredible role of elders.
Absolutely. The role of elders in our culture really is around our teachings are that our elders are closest to the creator. And so are our children. So our children are sources of medicine, and our elders are also sources of medicine, because our children came from the spiritual realm. And so they're incredibly pure and innocent. And our teachings are that they are to remind us on how to be a good human being. And they are seen as gifts of medicine because they are coming from spirit. And our elders, who have gone through 4 life cycles. We have 4 life cycles. We have our infancy, and then we have our childhood, and then our youthhood, our adulthood, and our elder years. And so our elders are revered for having a tremendous amount of wisdom and a tremendous amount of experience. Because to survive, traditionally speaking, in these lands and territories, 1,000 years ago, away from our phones and Netflix and skip the dishes and the noise in the streets and the cars and the heat and the hydro and the concrete, imagine what it would be like living outside overnight, today. So our elders embody a tremendous amount of knowledge, a tremendous amount of wisdom, how to survive, how to pass on knowledge. They were our knowledge keepers. And it was the job of every community member to obtain knowledge, to be like in a living encyclopedia, so that they could be our teachers and our leaders and our educators and the heads of family by the time, we as young people, even adults or even up into our middle ages, don't carry that kind of amount of experience. And traditionally speaking and contemporary speaking, we look to our elders for a lot. And then, of course, we look at our elders and say, you lived a lot of life. You've taken care of us. You've taken care of me as a baby. You've taken care of my grandchildren, or you've taken care of your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. And when you finally get to those elder years, it's time for us to take care of you. And that's what we say as a community. We say, once you're up there in age, you lead us and you guide us and we follow your directions and your orders and your words. But now it's our turn to take care of you, because they've taken care of us through their entire lives. And I found that to be such a beautiful, cycle of life, that you put in, all of this work. And then it's not like, okay, you're old, you're on your own, which, we see that in contemporary society. But no, it's our turn to take care of them, because they took care of us for a lifetime.
That's great. That's awesome. Because as an elder, sometimes you think, gee, or what is that youthfulness? Because there's some youthful elders, but also usefulness in those latter years. That's great. Another question was the resurgence of your language. What's is there a driving factor behind that is
Absolutely. I think before, we talk about the driving factor for reclaiming language, we need to back it up a little bit and talk about how we got to this point. It was illegal for us to speak our language publicly and, of course, throughout the residential schools legacy. And so that had a detrimental effect on our ability to keep our language alive. So it was, one of the manifestations of cultural genocide. And if we were caught to be, speaking our traditional language, there was be severe ramifications for that. And so that after generation after generation after generation after generation, the fact that it's still here is something to celebrate. I have two incredible relatives of mine who are Katzie, and they're going to UBC, the University of British Columbia, to get their PhD in linguistics for teaching and passing on this incredible knowledge of carrying our language on further on to the next generation. And so the driving force behind language reclamation is for Katzie identity. And, for many of us today, we struggle with our aspects of our identity. Who am I in the 21st century? What does it mean to grow up as a Canadian citizen in the Lower Mainland of British Columbia with COVID, with technology, with the politics, with the climate crisis? We're all kind of grappling with our identity to some degree, especially if anybody's ever gone through a midlife crisis, right? Or adolescence and trying to figure yourself out, right? And for Katzie, we do this intergenerationally. We've always been on this path ever since colonization happened and contact has been made. We've been on this pathway for reclamation, for resurgence, for resistance, for resilience, are aspects that we're trying to move forward. So the driving force is a reclaiming of our own identity so that we are practicing being whole, or we are practicing becoming Katzie, because that was disrupted because of colonialism.
Great. So actually, I maybe build on this. So you talk about the resurgence of your language and that identity. What are some other current? I don't want to use the word issues. What are some of the challenges? Some of the realities that are important to Katzie and the Katzie Nation in 2021.
Mm-hmm. And I think if you ask any Katzie relative of mine, in the community, on reserve, off reserve alike, one of the most common responses to that would be cultural preservation. There is a sense of fear of losing connection to culture. So culture is very important. But there are other things like environmentalism is incredibly important. Health and wellness is also at the very top of our agenda to make sure. And I know that we share that with the greater community when we talk about aspects of mental health and caring for our mental health, caring for our aging elders, making sure that there's sustainability and food security. Those are some of them are common themes of things that we know and talk about. But also there's this act of justice that's very important to Katzie too. Our history as communities in this colonial state of Canada hasn't always been sunshine and rainbows. And Katzie has been cut off from a lot of decision-making and in fact completely removed from authority of our own lands and territories. So land reclamation and land influence over our lands and territories is also an incredibly important step in the right direction, because that's our mother, right? That's our mother, and then those are our ancestors. And so that is also at the top of of our list, to be able to govern our lands and protect our lands like we've been doing since the beginning of time.
That's really helpful. I think, and we only got 2 minutes left.
I know. That's the nature of it.
Yeah, no, this has been great, and I, understand how we can get understanding and whatever reconciliation or truth looks like. I mean, just listening to you and listening to your heart, and listening to some other Katzie and my relationships with Katzie or Kwantlen. I've got some people living in the building that I look after that are, one gentleman just passed away. He was from the Mount Currie band. And really what Angus wanted from us was just to listen to him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And is that You think that's, am I online or on the right base with that?
I think we are aligned, and I think that that's natural for any human who, I think that's in our humanity, is all human beings. And I learned this from Oprah Winfrey herself. Every human being wants to be validated. And for the longest stint of our history as a country, nobody's listened to Indigenous voices, but only in a time of truth and reconciliation has incredible, brave allies, champions, advocates for reconciliation, put a pause on business as usual and opened up the floor and said, we're here, we're terribly sorry, but now's the time where we zip it and we start listening and learning to Indigenous peoples. And as somebody who's been involved in this work for a number of years now, the last 6 months alone has gained a momentum like I've never seen before. So the time is now. This canoe is getting ready to set sail for people. People are always worried about the resistors and the naysayers. I'm like, leave them back on the shore. This boat is going ahead forward. And our job is not to convert anybody. Our job is to find all of our champions, all of our friends who want to join us on this journey. So with that in mind, I know we're at the 8:30. I see that a lot of people want to continue on. If you would like, I would love to leave an invite to everybody who's here this evening to take a look at my website. My email is there in case you have any questions. And of course, feel free to follow me on any one of the social media channels, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. You just type in Len Pierre, something of this face will kind of pop up. And I do share lots of other public speaking events that I am invited to that are open to the public. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. I raise my hands to each and every one of you for taking time out of your evening to be here today. Thank you. Haichika.
Haichika. And I raise my hands to you, Len. It's been delightful, and this is in some form. This isn't going to be the end of the conversations. And you used one term, and I wrote it down again because it's been mentioned in a couple of other conversations I had. Used the word allies, and that just confirms a couple of things that I've heard. So again, thank you very much. This is the beginning. It's not the end of it, it's the beginning. So I just want to thank everyone for sharing this evening with us, for joining this conversation with Len. And I know I learned a lot, and I just want to give you a quick reminder that next week's session is on November the 3rd at 7:30, and it's trans inclusion in our communities. And Ash Lake from the Plea Community Services will be making a presentation on that evening as well. So if it's on our Facebook page, on our website, feel free to register for that. I think we've already got 50 or 60 people that have signed up for that. So again, thank you, folks. Thank you for taking the time to learn a little bit about the Maple Ridge Community Foundation and to learn a lot about Katzie. And again, heartfelt appreciation to Len for sharing his heart with us this evening. And I just, till we meet again, take care, everybody. Good night.